and I'll go ahead and turn it over to Craig.
Well, thank you, Alex. Hey, it's just terrific to be here. I see some names I definitely recognize. So for those of you who know me, hi again. I'm the operations side, FAA FAST team program manager. My colleague Ernie is on the maintenance side, and y'all might know him a little bit better. I've been doing this about 1.5 years now. Took over for Tina Buskirk. We sort of flip-flop jobs. I had taken on a management detail for 1 year, and then she was the FAST team program manager, and then we swapped. And anyway, I'm the permanent one until they fire me. So, we promote wings, safety, do presentations, fight fires, when neighborhoods get wound up about low flying airplanes and, unsafe practices at airports and some things like that. So my background is prior to coming to the FAA in 2014, the 4 years prior to that, I was a King Air instructor. And then prior to that, I had a 141, Part 61 and a 141 flight school in Houston, David Wayne Hooks Airport, if anybody's familiar. Prior to that, I worked at SkyWest Airlines as a pilot, some type rated in CRJs. Prior to that, I worked at a flight school in Phoenix here. It was known as Pan Am International Flight Academy at Deer Valley Airport. I was a chief instructor there. Prior to that, I had a Part 61 flight school in Austin. So you can see there's kind of a Texas connection there. You could see the Texas flag behind me. And then, before that, I did flight instruction in Phoenix at Westwind, which became Pan Am through a buyout by Simcom. And then prior to that, I was a manufacturing engineer. I went to both Southwest Texas State and Texas A&M. And I was kind of a mid-30-year-old career change person. So that's a little bit about my background.
Hey, Craig, real quick, can I throw something in?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so I forgot to introduce Craig's presentation. This is something I asked him to do some time ago. Something I've always been quite curious about. It's never happened to me. I'm not really looking forward to it happening, but I want it to be as comfortable as possible if it ever did, and learn more about it. And I'm sure a lot of you have that same desire, or for those of you that may have been ramp checked, maybe how they could have done it better. Maybe you had a question about what your rights were, how the process should have gone. I mean, we're all pilots. We know that there's a tons of regulations that apply to us that wouldn't happen driving down your car. An officer can't just pull you over for no reason. But it's different in aviation, and we should all be pretty comfortable with that and know what is expected. So I'm hoping Craig will enlighten us there. And I'm sure if you have questions, you can go ahead and throw them out there towards the end of the presentation. Right now, you're all muted, but you can send them in chat directly to me, to the group, or right to Craig if you're not comfortable with opening it up in person. But there'll be some time for that as well if you want to directly ask your question. All right, go ahead.
Yeah.
You're muted, Craig.
Yeah, I saw it. It had a little pop-up come up that says, "You were now muted." I'm like, oh, no. Okay, so I should be back. But yeah, Alex said that he thought maybe some folks would be interested in this discussion about a ramp check, and I'm certainly happy to do that. First and foremost, before I get into my material, because I'm afraid it's probably going to be a little boring, but a ramp check's not meant to be intimidating. I can't speak for how inspectors of yesteryear did it, but that's not what the FAA wants from us. They just want us to go out and make sure that safe things are occurring out in the National Airspace System. So, and I'm going to run you through the order, what we can do, what we can't do. And so, and if you have any questions, by all means, if you want to ask them along the way, that's fine. Or you can put it in chat, and Alex is going to monitor that. And, if there's something really germane to what we're talking about, please, Alex, interrupt me, and I'll do my best to answer it. So I'm going to share a screen. I'm going to start out with this one. Okay, so hopefully you're seeing a boring looking white piece of paper that says Volume 6 Surveillance. Alex, can you give me a thumbs up if you're seeing that? Okay, Michael did it. I'll take his word for it. Okay, so a ramp inspection, ramp inspections, let me be more clear on it, are specified in what is known as FAA Order 8900.1. Many of you probably know what that is. If you don't, just real quickly, it's about a 15,000 page document that tells FAA inspectors how to do everything that they're charged with doing. You can see this one, Volume 6, Chapter 1, Section 4 is for Part 91 ramp inspections, which is what I'm primarily talking about tonight. But of course, there are 135 ramp inspections, 125, 121, 137. Because you're gonna look at different things on an air tractor ag plane than you are, for just somebody flying around in a Cessna or a Mooney or something. So anyway, Volume 6, Chapter 1, Section 4 deals with the Part 91 ramp inspections. And some of this I'm just going to speed through because some of it's just inspector jargon, like this ABC, the codes and stuff. Those are just for recording our activity. But I went through and I highlighted some of the important parts here. Hopefully I'm not going to make you all too dizzy, but I'm going to scroll through this thing. Okay, so first of all, they tell us right in the beginning, inspector must always have his or her Federal Aviation Administration credentials available, since the pilot airman might not know who we are. Now, when we say that, we're not talking about like that badge that goes around your neck that's like a key card for the office in your computer. It's not a business card. What it is, it's a document called a 110A. And I am going to stop that share. I'm going to start a new one.
So whenever you want to do the poll questions, just let me know.
Yeah, I'm going to get to that in just a second, Alex. Thank you. But that's what one actually looks like. Okay, so that's anytime an FAA inspector needs to identify himself officially, that's what you should see. And it's not the bling on the right, it's the little card on the left.
It's not showing up there, Craig.
It's not?
No, your screen's not shared. Well, you're not.
How about now?
It. Yeah, there. It's coming up now. Yeah, there you.
Thank you. Yeah, I selected it. I just didn't hit go. Yeah, so it's not the, like I said, it's not the shiny metal on the right. The 110A is actually the card that's on the left with your picture on it. And so that's what you'd want to see. If an inspector walks up, or if someone walks up, identifies themselves as an inspector, and they can't produce one of these, they're done. You're done. Say, hey, come back when you got your 110A. All right.
What's on the back side of that card?
Go back. Is a whole bunch of conditions of issuance, not really unlike like what you would have on the backside of your medical certificate or on the backside of a temporary certificate. It's basically sort of the authorizations and limitations of that card, which basically says we can go pretty much anywhere. Doesn't always prove to be true. I mean, we're supposed to be able to show that to TSA and get it access to like any part of the, like a major airport or airplane or something. TSA doesn't necessarily agree with that. So we have to negotiate a lot. So, okay. before we get started on some of the specifics, Alex has prepared some poll questions if you'd like to participate. And so if you'd like to kind of get started with those, it's going to be, well, you'll see them come up. It's going to be who's been ramp checked, what's your experience been, so forth. So.
Okay, everybody should see question number 1. So we'll give it a few seconds here.
It doesn't surprise me one bit that the TSA would try to fence with the FAA.
Well, the rule of thumb on that is just be as nice as you can, because being antagonistic with them is not going to get you anything. And if worst comes to worst, call for a supervisor and try to keep everything nice and cool.
So has everybody had a chance to answer? This is question number 2 coming across.
Alexander, Ian Branson, new kid on the block, just joined your chapter. Side question, will there be any opportunity to conduct any other business besides this during this meeting?
FAA wise or
Club,
EMC?
club. Sorry,
Yes.
club.
Yes, I will.
There's always supposed to be pizza.
Okay, and then there'll be a third question here coming up, and that'll be it.
Oh, I like that. I'd rather have a root canal.
I assume that only applies to people that actually had a ramp check.
And it looks like for the most part, most people haven't had a ramp check, and most people haven't known anybody that has, and those that did go through it, the majority seemed like it was an indifferent experience, but a few that are noting that it wasn't as pleasant as possible. Again,
I
if you
just
want
want
to address those. Yeah, go ahead.
I just want to say that root canals are getting a bad rap, having recently had one. If they're done correctly, they're not supposed to hurt at all.
I can vouch for that.
All right. So did everybody see the results there? All right. Well, I am going to continue. All righty. So here's some of the rules of engagement to go with this. Well, first of all, let me say, it's intended to be a safety check. Just is everything in compliance? I'm going to go through some reasons later why we do them. It could just be random. It could be that we've got to go out to the airport and get a couple of ramps in before the end of the year. But it's not meant to be. Our intentions are not to try to find something wrong. It's just to, as I tell people, to demonstrate that you're in compliance. The airplane's okay, you're okay. All right, let's have a nice day. Moving on. And you'll see later in this where they, we're even part of our order is if everything looks like it's in proper order, that we're, we're advised to compliment you on doing a great job. I will guarantee you, I have never gone out onto a ramp and with the intention of hoping somebody would get busted. So some of the rules: inspector must not open or board any aircraft without the knowledge and consent of the crew or the owner or operator of the airplane. Okay, we can't just go out there and open the door and start rifling through your stuff. If the surveillance would delay a flight, the inspector should use prudent judgment whether or whether not to continue an inspection based on the pilot's schedule. I can tell you one of the best practices that we have, it's not on paper here, mind you, but is to, if you're going to have to ramp check an airplane, try to get the airplane that's returning as opposed to leaving. That way you're not going to delay somebody, add a bunch of anxiety to their flight, and just get them coming in. And, the advantage to that is they probably have, if they have a little additional time, that's when they're going to have it. And, and God forbid if something just really craters and goes wrong. I mean, you did see them just land to get out of the airplane. So it's like, well, okay, you were flying it. So might not be able to complete all items. We got a checklist I'll show you at the end. We might not get everything done, and that's okay. We don't get in trouble if we don't. If we just try to hit the big items. If there's some kind of big push, or you're picking somebody up to take them out for $100 hamburger and they're limited on time. Okay, well let's just just look over the main stuff and let you go about your business. All right, here's some of the reasons. Certainly, if there's some unsafe observation observed. If ATC notifies us that there's some area of concern or unsafe operation, observes the above discrepancies that might affect the airworthiness of the aircraft. So you just driving around on the airport and you see something that just looks squirrely. There is a routine surveillance activity. We're charged with doing a certain number of these every fiscal year. And then this last one, it's not going to make a lot of sense. It talks about the National Standards Work Program Guidelines. What that is if you're a POI, especially principal operating inspector, if you oversee a 141, a 135, 137, they're going to make you go out at least a few times a year and inspect those particular airplanes. And again, it talks about recurring complaints, 14 violations of the regs, special emphasis, illegal air charter. We tend to do quite a few of those, which hopefully wouldn't affect anybody here. All right, bunch of rules about airworthiness coordination. I should point out that there's a little bit of a difference between if an airworthiness inspector goes out or an operations inspector goes out. The airworthiness people, especially if they suspect something, they might want to do a little deeper dive and ask, at a later time, can you produce the maintenance logs or something like that. Over on the operations side, if we don't see something that concerns us, we don't go down that rabbit hole. It's just, we're just there to do an on the spot safety check. I hope that doesn't affect anything. Again, so we look at pilot documents, your airman certificate, medical certificate, pilot condition. I've never had this happen, but does the person seem like they're drunk or high or not in good shape for some reason? The standard aircraft documents, registration, airworthiness, airplane flight manuals, or any other manuals that should be present based on the equipment that's in the airplane. Looking at we're checking rather, that the registry number, the N number, people call it the serial number, registration certificate all match up. That just registration certificate, and this kind of talks about the pink slip, which is good for 90 days, if you just bought the airplane or got a change. Flight manual, if one is required. So if you have like an older airplane that wasn't certificated under the modern regs, of course, it might not be required to have one. So the weight and balance, documents, not meaning like the weight and balance you did for a given flight, meaning the weight and balance for the airplane, that it's appears to be current and correct. And see aircraft logbooks, not so much on the operation side, because, most people wouldn't carry, I certainly wouldn't carry their maintenance logs in the airplane. So, unless there's something that just doesn't look right, we're probably not going to go down that path. Airworthiness inspector, especially if he suspects there's some problem, he may say, hey, can we get together and you show us your books? But it won't be like right then and there. There's a good note. The lamination of a airworthiness certificate is not considered to be an alteration. Oh, and speaking of things that we don't do anymore, we don't check the tags on the seat belts. That has been determined not to be something bad. Just because you can't read it doesn't mean you got to get new ones. Another thing, again, talking to you folks, it might not be something that many of you think of all that often, but you can, airmen, people that own airplanes, they can have letters of authorization. It could be for, an airplane that can fly in the flight levels for RVSM. It could be for having an MEL or using an MMEL as an MEL, which I kind of think is a neat idea. I'm kind of sorry I didn't do that with my flight schools. But there's any number of authorizations that you could have in a general aviation airplane. And if they do, then they have to be on board. I'm going to avoid instrument flight rules for IFR helicopters because I'll be honest with you, I don't know all that much about helicopters. I can't figure out what makes them fly half the time. All right. Again, these are more of the special authorizations, Cat 2, Cat 3, which has to have a manual. And if they're available and we all have time, we can ask to examine a pilot logbook for a flight review, instrument proficiency, currency, stuff like that. More often than not, unless I'm in a flight school and you're dealing with student pilots, you're generally not going to have a pilot logbook there. But it's available to us. Again, there's the MEL. If there's a airplane using an MMEL as an MEL, we would want to check that the document's there. If it's a leased aircraft, have to have a copy of the lease. This goes back and reiterates about the Cat 2 and Cat 3. There's some of the other ones. These you'd probably find in corporate jets, which can certainly be privately owned in, aircraft. Pertinent and current aeronautical charts. Well, most people are using EFBs now, ForeFlight, some sort of an electronic flight bag, and they get updated, but, certainly that's available to take a look at. We inspect the aircraft. I see it says safety belts, but we're just looking for something that's obviously defective. We're not looking for those labels again. VOR check, ELT battery, if you can even, determine that from it. A lot of them you can't even get to. And we're certainly not going to sit out there with wrenches and start tearing into things. And there's some special rules for large or turbine-powered multi-engine airplanes. And if you ever want to go and read this as I'm scrolling through it, this is just Google FAA FSIMS FSIMS. This is all publicly available information. All right, turbojet powered airplanes. All right, inspection discrepancies. Now, not so much with an operations inspector, but certainly with a airworthiness inspector. If a flaw is found with the airplane, there's something wrong with it. It could possibly necessitate the issuance of a my head just went blank. With a discrepancy tag 8620-1. I actually got a picture of one coming up here in a little bit. condition notice, which gets tied onto the airplane. It's a triplicate. It has carbon copy form things in it. It's really old school. But at any rate, that would be done. In fact, for an operations inspector, if we see something that we really feel is not right on an airplane, the first rule of thumb is, best practice, call back to the office and see if you can get an airworthiness person to come out, because we're basically not qualified to make mechanical things unless we just see something falling off the airplane. All right. And then when we're done, discuss any pertinent safety information with the pilot or operator, return any document, advise the pilot of any upcoming accident prevention or other safety meetings. So there's where we kind of get our wings plug or our safety meetings plug in. And then here's what I told you about earlier. If there's no discrepancies or evident, compliment the pilot or the operator. So I'm going to stop there before I scroll down to some of the examples and just kind of run through what you might have questions on. I find maybe the most common questions are these kind of what if questions. Well, what if you do find a problem? What are you going to do? How are you going to handle that? What happens? And it, by all means, it depends on what it is. And to a small degree, it can depend on the inspector themselves. But, with the compliance program and the compliance philosophy having been in place since, I think, like 2016, our directive is to help the pilot, help the airman get in compliance. And so that's what we would normally do. So let's say we see something that doesn't look right, or it is wrong. The airman, there's maybe like not a registration in the airplane, or who knows what it is. Doesn't have his medical with him or something like that. All right. I hope this works. No, cancel that. All right. So did that screen just change to a blue and yellow and white thing? Okay, good. I got a couple of thumbs up, so I'll take that. All right. So we've got this. This is a trifold brochure. It's just a front and a back. And if we do find something wrong, the first thing that the inspector has to do is give you this. This is the new version of the pilot's Bill of Rights. It talks about the compliance program on the first page. And then I'm going to scroll down to the second page. On here, it actually goes through the verbiage of the pilot's Bill of Rights. And the inspector has to take this blank space that's in the center and write what the issue was in there. We hand that to you. Okay, here's your information. So now we can, now that we've done this, you've been advised of your rights. Basically you have the right to just, tell me to pound sand, and I just have to take it back to the office and, turn it into whatever I turn it into. But but the next goal is to work with the airman to resolve this non-compliance. Oh, I don't have my medical with me. It must have fallen out of my wallet. Okay. Well, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to call back to the office, have somebody back at the office verify that you do actually have a medical, because we have the computer records for that. It's not unlike when the cops pull you over and, they already know whether you have insurance. It's just, do you have it on you? And so, okay, let's say you have a medical. So, okay, that's reasonable. It fell out of your wallet or something. Okay. So we got to talk about how to get you in compliance. So we're going to have that conversation, and try to help you the best we can. We can't really get that document for you, but you can get a copy of it for yourself. You can get an authorization off of FAA.gov, a letter that you can have emailed to you that will verify. I think they call it a verification letter. So, whatever it takes, airworthiness certificates all just torn up and you can barely read it. Okay, well, here's the number to call back to airworthiness inspector back at the office. And especially if it's during business hours, they can probably have you another one, within an hour or so. But at any rate, that's what we're directed to do now, is to help you get in compliance. I do see a hand raised, Stephen. If you'd like to unmute yourself, I'd be happy to.
You can use your space bar as a push to talk.
If I'm the only Stephen here, no, I don't have a question.
No, it's Stephen Dickinson.
Okay. Other Stephen.
Stephen,
Okay, now, how's that?
Yeah, I think you've got you now.
Oh, good, okay. Well, my question is on the airworthiness certificate. How does that have to be displayed and where on an experimental aircraft?
Well, I got to admit, I don't know if there's some difference on an experimental aircraft. I'm just not that familiar with them. But, you know, on a normal aircraft, it just has to be where it can be seen, you know, somewhere it can be seen. The only exception to that I know of, and again, I'm probably not the sharpest knife in the drawer. The 137 agriculture guys, they can have it in they can have a photocopy in a pouch that's in a Ziploc that's somewhere where nobody would ever find it. But I think they throw them a bone because all the chemicals and stuff that are in the airplane. But
I'd be happy to answer that.
Yeah, go ahead, Kelly.
For our experimental aircraft, it's the same as certified aircraft. For the certificate, the other thing, the certificate will say you have to have your operating limitations with you, and those can be in the back pocket of your seat or whatever. They just have to be in the airplane.
Okay,
Yeah,
but they don't have to be visible, or they do have to be visible from outside the airplane?
The limitations don't have to be visible, just the airworthiness certificate.
Right, okay. That answers my question. Thank you.
And those, I know the more modern version of that airworthiness certificate has those limitations printed right on it. So,
Yeah, it comes as a packet. When I got
Right.
mine, everything was together. Yep.
and I don't think there's any case where it has to be visible from the outside of the airplane. It just has to be visible from somewhere in the airplane.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Thank you again.
Oh, my pleasure.
Greg, we got another question on
Okay.
chat. It says,
Let's
if
do
I
it.
forgot my license by accident, but I have a photo of it front and back on my phone, will this get me a pass to get out of jail free card?
Well, not necessarily. I will say that the FAA is doing much better. I'm just talking in the past couple of years about having some item, an electronic version or an image. But that hasn't happened about the actual airman certificate yet. The good news is, like I said, you can get on FAA.gov and get a verification letter within, if you got a computer in an FBO or flight school or something, you can usually have that in hand within 10 minutes. And that is acceptable. So that'll get you back out of there. So
This brochure we're looking at, should it be
Yes.
available on FAA.gov? And how do I search for that?
I would just, it
Sure,
should be.
I just found it. I'll post the link for you.
Okay, yeah, just compliance program and airman's rights. So, and a lot of it's just saying that, we have found that working with someone to correct a safety discrepancy or a problem is a lot more effective than, trying to hit you in the head with a hammer. And they've discovered that doesn't work so well. Or as some of the inspectors call it, a mark on the bark.
Craig, I got a question. This is Ian. In follow up to the question about an electronic photocopy or copy picture of a airman certificate, does that also hold true for medical? I actually have a PDF on my phone of it, just in case, my wallet gets wet or something and it becomes unreadable.
Yeah. So far, you do have to possess it. But like I said, you can get the verification, so it's not that big of a deal. And then replacement certificates for both the plastic pilot certificate and the paper medical certificate, they're $2 and they take less than 2 weeks to get. but the verification letter is good for 30 days. So you should be good. Something that comes up, and I need to keep moving here, but something that comes up on practical tests from the DPEs to a degree is that sometimes people will inadvertently, when you get that medical certificate, there'll be the thing where it's got the little scissor lines, but then it's got the conditions of issuance, and it says fold, but it looks like the scissor lines. Well, technically, if you cut those conditions of issuance off, it's not legit anymore. It's not the full document. So that would be another case where, we're not going to write you up or anything, but we're going to say, hey, would you go ahead and get yourself a verification letter, and then get yourself a new certificate because you're missing those conditions. All right. So hopefully you're seeing my document again. So these next 2 pages they call it the job aid. Let's think of it as the checklist. So we'll have a copy of this with us, whether it's electronic or paper. I'm of the age where I still like paper, but you can do it electronically. But this is where we just record the information, SAT, unsat. And you can see these various things that we can look at. And again, it's based on how much time we have. The radio station license, of course, that wouldn't be effective unless the airplane was operated outside the continental United States. But anyway, you can see it just kind of goes through the list I just went through in the guidance. There's a second page. If we're able to get into the weeds, general airworthiness. Yeah, we do a walk around and just look at it. Is anything falling off? Is anything look not correct? And things that we can write it down. The biggest value of this, well, I shouldn't say the biggest, but a good purpose that this serves is if there is a problem, now we have a record of it, we can take it back to the office and we can record it. And then, of course, the other thing is any ramp check we do, we have to record, in the work system. And it just helps us, remember it. I know I certainly can't remember everything 5 minutes after I do it half the time.
Can you scroll up a bit just to the last
certainly
line
can.
item? Stop right there, where it talks about safe seats and safety belts. Exactly what is it you're looking for?
Just general condition.
Is that actually more of an excuse to enter the airplane?
Well, no, because no, it's not an excuse to enter the airplane. I think it's just a safety check. If we're gonna have to stick our head in and look to see, does it look like it has all its placards? You got to stick your head in to kind of see that. You can't really see that from the outside very well. Like I said, we're not reading the labels on seat belts, but is there one that's so tattered you're concerned with it? Is it look like it needs to be tied in a knot instead of clipped together? That's my take on it. It's kind of like that very first item where it says general airworthiness. We're just kind of walking around, just taking a look at it. Okay, the control surfaces look okay. Is the cowling look like it's going to fall off? Which has happened, by the way. I saw a report of that. I don't know, 2, maybe 3 months ago. Somebody took off from somewhere, and the cowling came loose and actually fell off.
At some point, whenever you're ready, could you please address a situation where a pilot is fully cooperative with you or with an inspector during a ramp inspection, except when it comes to access to the airplane, and how that is received and acted upon, etc. When you're ready.
Okay. Yeah, I just actually, really, I'm almost done with this document here. This is, unfortunately, it's not the whole thing, but this is what a condition notice looks like. And again, it's triplicate with carbon paper. It's got a couple of big reinforced eyes in the top of it with a piece of white string. If an airworthiness inspector specifically, we're allowed, but they discourage us from doing it. If they tie it on the airplane, it's not supposed to be removed only by the inspector that tied it on there. So that means like once it got fixed. All right, instrument helicopter stuff. I'm just gonna roll through. Ramp inspection flow chart. For those of you who like flow charts, I'm not going to go through the whole thing. Again, you can go to just Google FAA FSIMS FSIMS, and you can get to this. Letter of correction. So this is gonna kind of pave my path to start to answer that question. If we see something, if we encounter something that's wrong, and the airman is a little less than cooperative, kind of one of our coercion steps in this is to say, okay, well, we're going to have to send you a letter of correction, which is official. That kind of makes this officially a thing now. And we're going to describe what the problem is and say, hey, we're asking you to correct this within 10 days. And then the letter in and of itself doesn't mean all that much, except that legally it paves the way. If the person still remains uncooperative, then we could choose to go down the violation path, and then the inspector's got a ton of paperwork he has to do, and the airman's not happy, and nobody's happy. All right. So that hit the end of it. I am going to stop share. All right, I think I'm back live. So, yeah, the problem is that it could go down a legal path. I mean, the airman can certainly deny us access, and we're not gonna cause a ruckus out on the ramp at that day on that time. But there are federal statutes that allow for the FAA to do these inspections or to do 709 re-examinations. And I mean, this doesn't really come out of the 14 CFR. This actually comes out of the 49 USC, I think. Don't quote me on it. But it basically is, yeah, we have the right to inspect something if there's a reason to inspect it. Okay. And so it starts to go down a legal path at that point. I've never had that happen. The first thing I would do is I'd go back and I'd tell my boss, okay, I've had this happen. I can almost guarantee you what she would say. She'd say, okay, we'll call AGC, the legal side of the FAA, and get specific instructions for them on how to handle this. And then we're going to do that because at that point, we start to need to be very careful that we don't make any mistakes.
Well, the reason I bring it up is because it's a topic that has come up in discussion in legal circles, and the consensus that I've heard is that it's best to not flatly refuse access, but only at that time. In other words, offer you the opportunity to schedule a date and time when it's convenient for all parties to conduct this onboard inspection, but at a time when, say, my representation is present to supervise what you're doing.
Yeah, and that would be acceptable to me. I like I said, I've never had that happen personally. In fact, I don't know anybody that ever has had that happen. But that would be acceptable. If you said, hey, look, I don't want to do it at this time, but I would like to, schedule something where I could have my representation present or whatever. Okay, that would work for me. I mean, I'd still go back and discuss it with management and make sure that they don't think I'm taking a misstep. But yeah, that works. I would just tell you, and I mean, different people believe different things. But I would just tell you that in my experience, you might be wasting money on your lawyer, but if it makes you feel good, it's okay. It doesn't bother me one way or the other. I've definitely had people who have had pilot deviations, airspace bust, runway incursion or something. And, the first thing they want to do is, and they've done, and it's fine, but they've brought, an AOPA lawyer with them to the meeting or the Zoom meeting or, however it's worked out. And that's fine. But at the end of the day, we don't do anything any differently just because there's a lawyer sitting there. If it's a pilot deviation, we say, okay, well, we need to talk about how to fix this. And that's one of the functions actually a fast program manager does is if the investigating inspector once thinks that it's serious enough or egregious enough that they want some retraining, that's one of my functions. Is as a FAST team program manager, is I put together a training curriculum and then oversee the completion of it. So, and usually, yeah, at least so far, my experience has been is that the attorneys are just sitting there going, yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah, okay, yeah, take the deal. Yeah, get on out of there.
I experienced about 20 years ago a ramp inspection where, and fortunately I did not own the airplane because I would have been far more angrier than I was, but the inspector boarded the airplane and he started flipping switches, turning knobs, and playing with avionics. And it struck me as entirely outside the scope of why he was there. And I think he seized the opportunity to perhaps play with something that he wouldn't otherwise have access to. And I thought that was a real abuse of power. And so from that point going forward, I think hopefully better equip myself for the next time, this type of encounter happens.
Well, I'm really sorry that you had that experience with it. I don't think there's any excuse for that. I think that inspector was out of line. And in fact, as training goes nowadays, I'm also a trainer. We specifically tell folks that, hey, that's, how would you put it? That's a worst practice, not a best practice. It's kind of the opposite. For one thing, I mean, an owner would have every right to say, you went in and flipped switches and moved things around and you broke something. So now you guys owe me some money. And they have the right to do that. And we would, we're kind of defenseless. Our defense is don't touch it so you don't get blamed for it. You want to be in, on that solid ground there. Peter, I see you got your hand up. You're muted.
Hello,
There you
Mr.
go.
Tompkins, Peter Stein.
How you doing?
Thanks for calling on me, and pleasure to meet you.
Same here.
So I wanted to ask a couple questions, and I apologize, I didn't see the beginning of the meeting, so I may have missed this. If you did cover this in an earlier slide, please just tell me that. And I don't know if this is something you can actually talk to us about or not. Might be considered sort of a trade secret or something. But I'm curious, how often are ramp inspections done? Because I've heard from a lot of people, I've never known anybody who had a ramp inspection. and the second question is sort of related to that is, I'm a statistics guy, as you may recall. And so my second question is, how often, what are the probable outcomes from an inspection, right? Like, how often do you find something wrong? How often is everything just A-okay?
Okay. So, yeah. Well, there have probably been fewer ramp checks this past year than at any time in history.
Yeah, right.
We've pretty much only been doing those that we need to, like with the charter operators and the ag sprayers and stuff, and we've been using video technology for those. But just a general aviation, FAA guys out walking on the ramp, I don't think that's hardly happened at all. Myself, I've done a lot of ramp checks, and I've done a lot of them as training exercises for new inspectors. Because for those of you that don't know, a new inspector has to conduct almost everything that the FAA would have him ever do under the tutelage or observation of a trainer to be able to become signed off on it. And so because I'm one of the trainers, I've gone out and done tons of ramp checks just for the purpose of training, but I think your chances are really low of ever having one. But I really just encourage anybody, that this isn't the FAA. This is not the FAA from back when my dad flew his air coupe. It's a different organization now, and we're definitely not out there to have anybody feel harassed. The FAA management tasks a FSDO to have, ideally, and we don't get in trouble if we don't, but ideally a certain number of various kinds of activities every fiscal year. Ramp checks are one of them. In fact, off hours ramp checks are even figure into it for a low percentage, meaning, sometime not during business hours. But, we don't get in trouble if we don't get that done. We just do the best we can. And we're, hugely understaffed. So, our excuse is built in. And I don't know of a FSDO in the US that isn't understaffed. I hope that kind of answers Peter.
Yeah, mostly. How often do you find something wrong, do you think? I mean.
Oh, well, like I said, I can't speak for everybody, but
No, but just your own experience.
I have maybe out of the, 70, 100 I've done, maybe 2 discrepancies.
Okay, so most of the time everything's just A-okay. Really, people are doing a pretty good job of maintaining their planes. Okay.
Yeah, people do a great job. I was out doing training with a guy, and this is a trainee, and usually the trainees are kind of anal, because they're trying to impress the guy watching them, And anyway, it was I don't want to say what it was, but it was something. Anyway, 2 airplanes came in at the same time, and so he went over and he's checking, and turns out the pilot doesn't have his stuff with him. Left his wallet in the car, and he says, "Okay, I'm going to go use the bathroom. It's going to take me about 10 minutes, and then I'll be back and we'll pick this up again. How does that sound to you?"
Right.
So, that was a pretty good solution, especially from a trainee. Sometimes the trainees get a little fussy, but that's part of my job as somebody that's been there a while. Say, "Okay, calm down. Calm boy."
There you go. Okay, well, thank you for that answer. Appreciate it.
You're welcome, Peter. Eric, I see you got a hand up. Eric Klein.
I have a quick question, and this is related to everything we were talking about. My question is, I don't have to spend 5 minutes at the airport before I see something that I know should not be flying, and I think most people try to take good care of their planes, but you have quite a few, at least in my experience, where you can spot something even at a distance that you could identify as a safety problem. For example, windshield so crazed you can't hardly see through it, or pieces missing, dented control surfaces, things like that. How are those slipping through?
Well, my answer to that is I don't know. I haven't had that experience, but I don't hang out at the airport. I have a purpose when I go, even if that purpose is to give a ramp. I'll go through the FBO. I'll let an airplane pull up. Hey, I'd like to introduce myself. Here's my 110A. I'm from the FAA. Hi, I'm here to help. It's the old joke. So not kind of living in the hangars, and I don't patrol them or prowl around or anything. I haven't had that experience, but if I did, especially if it was a mechanical looking thing or something like that, I think I'd probably get on the phone and call, one of the airworthiness inspectors, back at the office and say, "Hey, I just saw this thing and this guy might live here. I don't know. Looked like he might've came out of a hangar, but the airplane looks a little squirrely to me." And, try to put it onto somebody who's a professional at, what that stuff's supposed to be like. Because I don't know how much crazing is okay and how much isn't. Okay, got quiet. Any other kind of FAA questions while you got me here? I know I'm just encroaching on Joe's time just a little bit, but I'm happy you've got me here. I'm happy to try to.
One more going to take away from Joe. I just want to was going to pile on kind of where Peter was going, and it kind of depends. When you said you only found you only wrote up 2 out of 70.
Yeah.
I was just going to ask you to just kind of give some examples of kind of on the exactly what happens. You've talked about it a little bit on the when all goes well, and then what are some common things that maybe get written up, and what happens with those, and then what's kind of a worst case scenario that you've seen, just to
clearly clearly I haven't seen a worst case, because again, we try to resolve this stuff, so we want to resolve things at the lowest possible level. So if we can get the airmen engaged and get something fixed, whether it's a component on an airplane or missing a certificate of some kind or some sort of thing like that, we just try to, hey, let's just get this corrected and move on down the road. And that's what our bosses want to see. Our bosses, when they go through those computer records, hey, what did Craig do, last week? Oh, well, he worked with a guy and got something corrected. Hey, attaboy, good. That's what we want to, that's what they're looking for. Oh gosh, I'm trying to think of, we had one airplane that was missing a compass correction card placard. And in this case, the guy had made a photocopy of it last time he had the airplane swung, and he had it in the maintenance log. So he put it in the next day. He wasn't flying anywhere anyway. Put it in the next day, took a photo of it, emailed it, done. I know that sounds light. You're looking for something heavier than that. I don't really have.
I honestly just looking for like real examples, and you said you've done like 70, like we've tried to get like a number. How many do you do in a year? How many does the FSDO do in a year, like at airports around Phoenix?
Oh boy. It really, it depends. I know the airworthiness people do a lot more of them than the operations people. And that's just because they're staffed better than we are. They've got a little bit of, they've got a little bit more slack in their day. Not that they have slack in their day, but the ops people, they're just working their tails off on the flight schools, the 135 operators, and that's all continued operational safety stuff. And so, if you ask the administrator, do you want us to go do ramp checks, or do you want us to make sure that the charter, the Tenormores or, the charter guys out flying citations are safe? They're going to say, no, make sure that those paying passengers are staying safe. But, it just never fails that, periodically the office manager will say, okay, look, I got a call from the division manager, and he said, we haven't done any ramp checks in a month. And so I want everybody to get out there and do at least one, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And honestly, when you talk about continued operational safety, not that, I think most GA owners and operators try to do a good job. Your life depends on it. So, I know I've made the decision to go to flight schools, especially ones that if they've got, starting to have a few little issues, because, they're doing a lot more operations with those airplanes. And we're relying on the safety of those airplanes, a little bit more, so that's sort of been my personal choices. And I'll, if I'm told, hey, I need you to go out and do one a month for the next 3 months, then okay, I'm typically probably going to, go to one of the flight schools.
Yeah. All right. Thanks.
Sure.
There's a couple of questions, Craig. We'll get through it quick. And
absolutely, Alex.
Okay. So this is back earlier when you were talking about the airworthiness certificate. The question is, can we have our airworthiness certificate in our flight bag? And I'm assuming that means the flight bags. Yeah.
Okay. Let me kind of capture that question and put it in context for like with Perry and some of the other folks. It's going to get you a little counseling on the ramp, but you're not going to get written up. You're not going to, FAA jail or anything. But it's like, well, it's not supposed to be in your flight bag. Okay. It's supposed to be someplace where it's visible. So.
And here's the other question. How long should a normal Part 91 ramp check take, for example, for just a 172?
I'm typically, even with a trainee, I'm probably right at about 10 minutes. Unless something goes weird, but it's typically about 10 minutes. And
like a traffic stop.
I guess I'm fortunate. I haven't been pulled over in 20 years. So, but I get told I drive like a little old lady. So, about that. Some of the ones that I've had take longer than about 10 minutes has been because the people were so at ease and, it wasn't what they were expecting. So they start wanting to talk to you answer questions. And hey, well, since you're here, can I ask you a couple of questions? Well, sure, yeah, why not? And it kind of gets conversation. So the ones that have gone longer, it's just been through just chit chat.
And of the 2 out of 70 or 100 that you had issues, were those resolved on the ramp there, or were these that had some follow-up later on?
Yeah, I think, well, like I said, I remember the one. I know there was more than one, but I remember the one was that compass correction card. It's basically a required placard. And the gentleman was a resident at that airport, and like I said, he told me the story. Okay, he could make another one, cut it out, and he sent me a picture, an email picture of it, in place. And so, yeah, okay, good, problem solved. But that was like the next day.
And here's our last question. Does the FSDO do inspections around the state at airports other than in the Phoenix area?
Yes, we absolutely are supposed to do that. We probably don't do a good job of it. I know, again, kind of throwing it over at the airworthiness folks, and the ops folks for that matter too. When we are out at a more remote airport, maybe something down south, maybe something up north, whatever, to the east, we will try to do some ramp inspections when we're there, just because we know it doesn't surface on the radar very often, and we're not gonna be able to typically justify jumping in a G car and the gas and the time and everything just to say we're going to St. John to do a couple of ramp inspections. Now, if we got a reason to, if there's somebody there that there's been a complaint on, some operator of some sort, that's a completely different thing. We can justify that all day long. But just to say we want to go do willy-nilly GA ramp inspections, we probably need another reason to be there.
On my own sake, if you own your own airplane, you pretty much know where all your paperwork is and where it's supposed to be and whatnot. Since I rent, it's always digging around, making sure that the FBO or whoever has the paperwork around there. So it always takes me more time to verify that. But as an airplane owner, I would think that unless you just get lax, there shouldn't be a big deal with any of this.
Yeah, I will say that, one of the things that generally goes very smoothly is if someone like yourself that rents, because I had 2 different businesses where I rented airplanes. If there's some summary sheet or can or book or something that comes with the airplane that, kind of summarizes what maintenance and things have been done on the airplanes, and that makes everything go really fast because, okay, we got it right there. Boom. Okay, yeah, this has been done. That's been done. Just look at the, look at the hobs. Yeah, okay. Okay, great. Here, hand it back to you. Where, we got to check more boxes than we normally get to check, and it's all right there. And in general, most of those summaries are pretty accurate. It's pretty rare to find one that somebody's overlooked something, an AD or something, because they're in the business of renting out legal airplanes. All right, boy, I'm walking on Joe a little bit. I do see Ian's got his hand up, so Ian, one last chance.
Last question. This should appeal to Peter in his statistics bent. What percentage, if any, of ramp checks come of looky-loos with binoculars trying to find tail numbers from the ground?
From the FAA side?
No. From people complaining about noise and so forth. I came from California, and there's a section just north of Escondido that there's people out there with binoculars that are relentless, just picking tail numbers off for the purpose of calling the FSDO and screaming.
Yeah. Okay.
Was just curious if. Go ahead.
Well, we have our fair share of noise complaints, and that's what that generally is. I say noise complaints. It's also kind of a combination noise and low flyer, because what happens is once we explain to people that the FAA is not charged with investigating noise complaints in any way, shape, or form, then they all become low flying airplane complaints, which is got more legitimacy. At least it's something that the FAA has responsibility for. But I don't think we've gotten anything where somebody said an airplane was unsafe or needed ramped or anything like that. It's mostly just been neighborhoods where people don't appreciate the noise. And, honestly, if it's a, sparsely populated area, there's not a whole lot we can do. In fact, the FAA has, AGC, the general counsel has recently told us that they're, how should I say this? They're looking into whether we can even investigate low flying aircraft complaints based on these like flight radar apps and stuff, because there's apparently not a known accuracy that's good enough to base a complaint on. So,
chain of evidence or something like that, I imagine.
yeah, and they are somewhat inaccurate. So I could see why AGC would be, kind of skeptical about following up on those. And, we also have to think about, inspector time. I mean, do we start chasing rabbits down holes, or do we try to take care of these big safety items?
Makes sense. Thanks.
All
Alex,
right.
I think I've stepped on Joe enough. Joe, I apologize that I've ran long, but I think it's great to be able to answer people's questions. And there you are, Joe. I see you now.
Yeah, if you have any closing comments, and I'll send out your contact information. So if you have further questions or something you want to discuss with Craig directly, you'll get that information, and you can always approach him. He's always been very approachable in my experience. Did you have any closing comments?
No, just that what you said is absolutely true. I'm happy to help anybody out. I enjoy working for the FAA. I enjoy general aviation. I enjoy, the pilots and, the safety events. And so, I'm absolutely, it's not lip service. I'm actually here to help. So if you ever have anything you need, just pop me an email, give me a call. I'll do my best.
All right, we're going to go ahead and move on. Craig, you're more than welcome to stay, but if you have to sign off, go right ahead. This is our first ever dual VNC and IMC meeting. We did a poll a while back, and people wanted to, instead of two different meetings, to have them back to back. So we're going to try that out and see how it goes. So I'm going to turn it over to Joe. Joe Getz is the IMC program coordinator for Arizona. It's a volunteer position, just like mine is, except in the VMC portion is what I do, and Joe does the IMC. And he's got a typical program set up. You'll kind of see what the VNC program would normally look like if we didn't have a guest speaker. Scenario based, it's training, it's open for discussion. So the more comments or questions or input, that's how the program is supposed to work. We all help each other learn and then move forward. Joe, you want to go ahead and take over?
Betcha. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Hello, everybody. Everybody's back in their week. I got a couple great scenarios tonight. One actually involves a ship that I fly all the time, and a situation where the FAA made a mistake. I know it's hard to believe, but it'll go over here. And what you do, and how being alert, you see something, do something, how important it is. And the other one, if we have time for it, will be a loss of GPS. So many of us today are so dependent now, though you don't have a VOR, you don't bring a map with you. But what if you're in the soup and you've lost, or the GPS has been shut down? Decisions to make before and during the flight. So that being said, maybe start with the first scenario unless there's any questions. Okay, let's see if I can do this smoothly then.
You're an avid hunter who owns a Grumman Tiger based in Syracuse, New York. The Tiger isn't a speed demon, but it'll do nicely for this trip. A week at a friend's hunting camp in the White Mountains of New Hampshire. This month, it's wild turkey season. The cabin owner and one of his friends are driving up from Connecticut and will meet you at the airport. You'll all fly out with gear to Berlin, New Hampshire. You flew into Berlin 2 years ago before you had your instrument rating. The scenery is beautiful, but the hills rise up 3,000 feet above the airport in several directions. Now you're instrument rated, so you review the 2 approaches and the departure procedure a few days before the trip. The trip in will likely be good weather. The trip back may not. The RNAV approach to runway 18 has several step downs and a high NDA of almost 900 feet AGL. However, it doesn't look especially tricky or steep. The missed approach hold is almost 4,000 feet AGL. There's also a VOR DME approach, but the RNAV would be your preference. The departure procedure from either runway is a climbing right turn to the VOR with a hold southwest until reaching the MEA for the route. The climb gradient is 400 or 462 feet per mile to over 4,000 feet. That's possible in your Tiger, but with nothing to spare. There's also a visual climb over airport to cross the airport at or above 4,500 feet before proceeding on course. The trip over is in clear weather, yet you file IFR and fly the RNAV approach for practice. Before you leave the airport, you use their Wi-Fi to update your GPS database as it will expire during the week at the cabin. When it's time to head home, the weather has lowered to 900-foot ceilings and 1 mile visibility with winds 110 at 6. Winds aloft are from the east at around 20 knots. At least the freezing levels are high enough not to be a concern. While your friend loads the airplane, including a big cooler with everyone's turkey meat, you head into the FBO. Checking the cleared routes home from Berlin, you see ATC has cleared aircraft direct, and there's a recommended route that's almost the same. There's also an airway route that seems unnecessarily convoluted. So you file for direct at 8,000 with a note in the remarks that you will fly the ODP. When you review the departure procedure, you get a shock. Your iPad automatically downloaded new data, and the departure procedure has completely changed. Now the procedure from runway 18 shows simply climbing runway heading to 1,500 feet before proceeding on course. For runway 36, it's 2,400. The new departure procedure would certainly simplify getting out of Berlin. However, it seems odd that a climb to the MEA used to be required, and now it isn't. You even double check to make sure you have the right airport. The VCOA is still crossing at 4,300. Or wait, is that lower than it used to be as well? You don't have a paper copy of the old procedure, so you don't know. But with ceilings at 900 feet, you can't depart visually anyway. Your clearance route comes back on the iPad as direct, just as you filed. How will you depart Berlin? 1. Fly the ODP as published. That's the new procedure. 2. Make a right turn on departure to the VOR. Climb in a hold south of the VOR, as with the old procedure, until reaching the VCOA altitude. Then continue a climb on course. 3. Make a right turn on departure to the VOR. Climb in a hold south of the VOR, as with the old procedure, until reaching the Aroka altitude. Then continue on course. 4. Don't depart until you talk with someone at Austin Center, or the weather improves for a visual departure. Analyze the resources, and then make your choice.
Okay, guys. What do you think? Before we do this, I have a question of Craig's still there, or all your pilots. Has anyone ever referenced the information on the compass correction card?
By the way, Craig did leave already, so.
Okay. It's a necessary evil, but I don't know of anyone that's ever looked at that in years. Okay, as we were. 1, 2, 3, or 4, and open for suggestions. How about number 1?
How old is this scenario?
It's not too old. Actually, it's not old at all.
The VOR procedure does not exist anymore. The VOR is gone, and the departure procedures have changed entirely.
Holy man. Well, for today, they're here.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Hey, Joe.
Yes, sir.
Is the VOR in service?
Yes, it is. But basically, you're going to fly the procedure, it's been approved. You're going to change your mind and do something else.
What was
Is
the
there
weather?
not to fly the ODP?
What was the weather on departure again?
That's what it's there for.
That's what it's there for. Well, in this case, we can be a little surprised because, well, I don't want to spill it. So the best answer, if you're a competent pilot, you did all your homework, did everything right, you should fly the ODP. But if you're really sharp, you might look a little deeper, and we're going to see that in a few seconds. So let me see what I do here.
What was the weather again at the time of departure?
About 900 feet, I believe it was.
Okay.
900 AGL.
Hey, Joe,
Yes, sir.
are there any conditions for this departure that we haven't looked at yet, like NOTAMs?
Okay, very good. Anyone else? That's correct. We're going to actually go into detail how, had you checked the NOTAMs, this scenario wouldn't happen, but that's a good catch, darn good catch. Let's see.
Now let's hear from Doug Stewart, who will provide further insight and analysis on this scenario.
There's no wonder this pilot is befuddled. If I were in the same spot, I'd be quoting Red Skelton's Clem Cadiddlehopper, for those of you old enough to remember him, saying, "They just don't seem right to me." And while this scenario might seem implausible, it's quite real. Whereas the turkey hunting pilot is fictional, a new ODP appearing with the update of the database happened on May 21st, 2020. More importantly, the new ODP wasn't right at all.
Charming.
My choice would be option 3 of flying the old ODP as best I could up to the Oroka. But in order to understand why, let's get back to the pilot who's trying to figure out what to do. A thinking pilot should have serious doubts about the new ODP. It states that departing runway 18, one should climb on heading 175, the runway heading, to 1,500 feet before turning on course. With a field elevation of 1,161 feet, that means turning on course at 339 feet AGL. The airplane might still be over the runway at that point. Furthermore, instrument departures are predicated on flying runway heading until at least 400 feet AGL. So that definitely does not seem right. On an iPad or paper chart, make a straight line from Berlin to Syracuse and view the underlying terrain. The course runs directly over the top of Mount Cabot, whose peak sits at 4,180 feet and is just 10.5 miles from the airport. Clearing that 3,000 feet of terrain gain will happen with a tailwind that will increase during the climb. Attempting to do this in a Tiger that's loaded to the max with 3 turkeys, plus the birds in the cooler, just doesn't seem like a wise choice. The Tiger's performance charts confirm this, so I'm ruling out option 1 of flying the ODP as published. Options 2 and 3 are the same, with the exception of the altitude required before turning on course. Both options have me turning right direct to the VOR, which could be done using GPS or the VOR until they decommission it. Theoretically, climbing to the VCOA altitude of 4,300 feet and then heading on course should provide obstruction and terrain clearance. However, given the issues with the new official ODP, how confident am I in the VCOA being right? There's also a danger of inadvertently leveling off at that altitude through automation mismanagement and heading on course to Syracuse. I might not end up in a CFIT accident, but the squirrels living on top of Mount Cabot would be ducking. No, I'll climb to the Oroka of 8,600 feet before heading on course. Although it will take me longer to climb to that altitude, it will guarantee that I won't come to my demise on the side or top of a mountain. After all, Orokas provide 2,000 feet of obstruction clearance in mountainous areas. I might not remember the exact directions to hold from the old ODP, but if I was above the VCOA altitude by the VOR, I should be safe climbing to the Oroka in a 1-minute holding pattern, regardless the direction. Irrespective of whether I chose option 2 or 3, I would amend my flight plan to read direct Berlin VOR, direct Syracuse. Remember that use of an ODP is the pilot's choice, unless the clearance includes the phrase cleared via the departure procedure. So it's perfectly legal to use a procedure of your own choosing in this situation. You just have to tell ATC. Furthermore, I would have my panel GPS or handheld set to the terrain page. Graphic depictions of terrain displayed in the cockpit have gone a long, long way in reducing CFIT accidents in general aviation aircraft. It would be foolhardy not to use it here. That leaves us with option 4, staying on the ground until talking to someone at Boston Center or waiting until the weather improves for a visual departure. Waiting for the weather to improve is certainly the safest option, as long as time is of no concern and I don't mind all that turkey breast slowly spoiling as the ice melts in my cooler. As for calling the center, well, let me tell you the rest of the story. I originally learned of the change to the ODP at Berlin on Friday, June 5th, 2020. I immediately freaked out. As someone who regularly flies in and out of Berlin as part of my IFR training trips, and has used Berlin in scenario training about the importance of using ODPs, I instantly saw a real possibility of a fatal CFIT accident. I called Boston Center and told them of the obvious mistake the FAA had made in the new ODP. It took some explaining to get a supervisor to appreciate the problem, but he agreed to send the matter on to Oak City. The following Monday, I got a call from the agency TERPS folks in Oklahoma. After explaining the situation, again, they agreed there was a problem and would fix it. On Thursday, June 11th, the FAA issued a NOTAM correcting the ODP for runway 18 to climb on heading 175 to 6,800 feet before proceeding on course. If you're wondering, the reason for the change to ODP in the first place was because the Berlin VOR was scheduled to be decommissioned. That finally occurred on September 10, 2020. Interestingly, the DME is still there, as is the Berlin identifier for that waypoint. Berlin used to be my lesson for why ODP are important. They are there for a reason. But now it's an equally important lesson on checking the NOTAMs. 4 months after the NOTAM correcting the ODP out of Berlin was issued, the published ODP for runway 18 still says climb on heading 175 to 1,500 feet before proceeding on course. It's still a NOTAM that corrects it. Any pilot departing Berlin in IMC without checking the NOTAMs could fly a short trip to a mountainside. Maybe it still says that by the time you're watching this. Go check and see. Perhaps the most important lesson, though, is that if something doesn't seem right to you, there's probably a valid reason you feel that way. Do not just ignore it. We can all make life-limiting mistakes. As this true event shows, that includes the FAA.
Now listen to the roundtable discussion where Doug is joined by Wally Moran, Bruce Williams, Tom Haynes, Kevin Plant, and Scott Denstead. Then visit the hangar to join the discussion.
Okay. We learned something from that gentleman. NOTAMs are very important. Any comments? Okay. Let's see.
Yeah, I had a comment, Joe.
Okay.
If I caught the dates right there, it seems like it took them 6 days to get a NOTAM out. That's atrocious.
Well, it is, and the sad thing is it took them how many months to correct the ODP?
Yeah, but waiting 6 days to get a NOTAM out is even worse, I think.
I agree. I mean,
Hey, Joe,
yes, sir.
did somebody actually take a look at the posted climb gradients there to see how they got it through to begin with? And see what, if there actually was a problem, or did Oklahoma City just go straight out and accommodate to the MVA or to the MSA and just leave it at that until they could get to it?
Well, I don't have that answer, but as Ken brought up, there should have been acted something that important a lot quicker than it was. A fatality would have changed it the next day.
Hey, guys.
Which might have been an expensive mistake for the FAA if they could find that it was their error.
Yeah,
Oh, that was really my question was, has anybody confirmed that it's actually an error in creating the procedure, the ODP, or was it that they solved it by going straight until they could review it, but it actually met the climb gradient requirements? Because those climb gradients that are posted right above it for 1.8 and 3.6 are quite steep.
No, it's most small airplanes pretty tough to do 450 feet per minute.
Well, it's not 450 feet per minute, it's 450 feet per nautical mile. And so that's a climb. Yeah, that's a climb gradient. It's not a vertical speed. It's a climb gradient. And generally 200 feet a nautical mile for fixed wing aircraft are what is pretty much standard. And anything at this gradient had to be approved by flight standards. I find it difficult to believe that they actually made a mistake and published something that didn't meet the ROC.
Well, I think that the lesson to be taken here is NOTAMs are important. And if you're familiar with the airplane, the reason the pilot caught that. But if you weren't familiar and you didn't look at the NOTAM, it'd be a one-way trip.
Hey, Joe.
Yes, sir.
One of my favorite things I took out of Doug's lesson there was that if you have an iPad or if you have some sort of chart with you, you could certainly take a look at that before you left and notice that the terrain rose rapidly in your on-course direction. And that might cause you to question the departure procedure.
Understand, just, if it doesn't look good, if it smells like a duck or anything, just look at it carefully.
Obviously a duck, yeah.
Yeah, so, well, good. I thought that was a nice one that just showed that was a mistake made and it wasn't corrected as quickly as I think we all thought it should have been. So, NOTAMs. We have enough time too. I have another scenario where we're all using glass cockpit, we're not all using glass cockpit, but we're all using GPS pretty much all the time. And we really depend on these things, a nice little tool. But what if you actually have a full glass cockpit, you're running GPS and there's an outage and you're in the soup? Are you prepared for that? Could you think in advance that what if that did happen and what would I do? Or do you have an alternate? So let's see what these guys do. This is pretty interesting. And let's go.
You own a G1000 turbo Cessna 182 that was built pre-WAS. So when it came time to install ADS-B, you also upgraded the airplane's GPS receivers to WAS. This was an expensive upgrade as the airplane has a primary and backup GPS system. At least you could save a few dollars by having the new ADS-B transponder use the airplane's GPS rather than installing a separate GPS for that unit too. The upgrade didn't go smoothly, as the avionics shop found corrosion under both of your GPS antennas and told you that they had issues getting all the new components to play together correctly. The first time you took the plane IMC, you saw a message, GIA 1 service. You figured that meant the GPS needed service, even though it was working fine. The message went away before you could get it to the shop, and they couldn't replicate it. You've been in IMC a couple of times since, and once saw GIA-2 service, but then it went away. Again, the GPS continued working the whole time. Today you're flying from Burbank,
Oh, I think you're sharing the wrong screen.
with headwinds.
Pardon me?
The whole trip will
I
be
think you're
over.
sharing the wrong screen.
To stop for a
Okay,
stretch break
I'm
in the
sorry.
Las Vegas area and assess the weather and fuel.
Said something sooner.
The flight is VFR most of the way, and headwinds aren't that bad. So you plan to launch again, stop at either Huntington Municipal.
Let me see what I'm doing
Utah,
here. I apologize,
or
guys.
Carbon County in Price. Huntington has
I'll get her
better
in a
fuel
second.
prices, and Carbon County has an ILS
Hey, Joe, can I make a suggestion on the audio?
based on the weather.
On your share screen in the lower left corner, you've got two check boxes.
Nautical miles
You want to check both those boxes, and the audio will play without an echo.
shows forecast ceilings of 600 feet
All right,
or
yeah.
better all day. Huntington has neither TAF nor even an
Oh, I've got failure here,
It shows the
guys.
loss for
I'll get it
Carbon
in a second.
County. No matter, you file Huntington as your destination and Carbon County
You
as
got
the
nothing up
alternate.
there, yeah.
The 182 has oxygen for these high altitude legs. The limit will be from freezing levels at 15,000, sloping down to the north. However, from Carbon County on, you can.
All right, we'll get back to you. I'll start that up a little earlier. I apologize. Let me get this over to here. This back to here. This should work better now. Oh, yeah? Are we on now?
I think it's minimized on your taskbar at the bottom.
You're not sharing.
Turbo Cessna 182
Okay.
3 WAS. So when it came time to install 8,
Let me get you back where you
that
were.
meant the GPS needed
Oh,
service.
did you tick the boxes in the lower left?
This went away before you could get it to the shop. And
I'm sorry, this is the first time I don't have two monitors on.
Joe, just hit your Alt tab and tab through the thing until you select it, and then it'll come back up.
Oh, okay. That's the Alt, huh?
Hold the Alt button down, hit the tab key until you get to it. Hold the Alt button down.
Oh. Maybe this, okay. That looks better.
they couldn't replicate it. You've been in IMC a couple
No
of
joy.
times and once saw GIA-2 service, but then it went away.
There we go.
Wow, oh, I'm so sorry. Let's get this about where you were.
Figured that meant the GPS needed service, even though it was working fine. The message went away before you could get it to the shop, and they couldn't replicate it. You've been in IMC a couple of times since, and once saw GIA-2 service, but then it went away. Again, the GPS continued working the whole time. Today you're flying from Burbank, California to Casper, Wyoming. With headwinds, the whole trip will be over 6 hours, so you plan to stop for a stretch break in the Las Vegas area and assess the weather and fuel. The flight is VFR most of the way, and headwinds aren't that bad. So you plan to launch again with a stop at either Huntington Municipal in Huntington, Utah, or Carbon County in Price. Huntington has better fuel prices, and Carbon County has an ILS approach. You can choose one based on the weather when you get there. The two airports are only 17 nautical miles apart. Carbon County has no TAF, but the MOS shows forecast ceilings of 600 feet or better all day. Huntington has neither TAF nor even an ASOS. It shows the MOS for Carbon County. No matter, you file Huntington as your destination and Carbon County as the alternate. The 182 has oxygen for these high altitude legs. The limit will be from freezing levels at 15,000, sloping down to the north. However, from Carbon County on, you can stay below 12,000 feet, and Casper should be VFR by your arrival. Soon after you depart Las Vegas, your IMC and see that GIA-1 service message again. This is annoying, but the GPS is unfazed. However, the winds are picking up as you pass Detan. You request 14,000 feet to stay below the icing. The winds now show 030 at 33 on your PFD. What was 75 minutes of fuel remaining at Carbon County is now down to 65 minutes. You consider a stop at Richfield Muni and tune its AWOS. It reports 2,000-foot ceilings and good visibility, as well as an approach from EBOV just 5 miles ahead. Then you get a message, GIA-2 service, followed almost immediately by a warning, GPS nav lost. Your CDI needle has turned yellow and shows DR in yellow. Then Salt Lake Center calls saying radar contact is lost. The controller asks if your transponder has failed because his radar can't pick you up at your altitude, but he usually gets ADS-B returns. You can see the current weather on your G1000, and your iPad shows connected to the G1000. Then you realize the iPad seems to have lost GPS position as well, and you're drawing a blank on how to uncouple it from the G1000. You ask the controller if there's a GPS outage. He's unaware of one. Carbon County has an ILS, but it requires DME to get onto the approach. You ask the controller if he can give you vectors onto the ILS at Carbon County. He says radar coverage drops out below 11,000 feet MSL. Unless you can get your ADS-B to come back online, you'd be on your own below 11,000. You ask what other airports in the area have ILS or VOR approaches that are reporting above minimums. He says most approaches are GPS in your area. Delta Muni has a VOR, or there's going up to Provo in the Salt Lake Basin. He says there's an ILS at Cedar City behind you as well. Where will you go? 1. Carbon County reporting variable at 3 knots, overcast 400, and 3/4 mile visibility. 2. Delta Muni reporting winds at 360 at 10 knots, overcast at 1,000, and 1 1/2 mile visibility. 3. Provo reporting 320 at 10 knots, overcast at 600 feet, and 1 mile visibility. Or 4. Cedar City reporting 010 at 8 knots, overcast at 500, and 1 mile visibility.
Okay, what do you guys think of that? I'd rather be on the ground.
Did you say overcast 100 at Cedar City? Oh, 500, disregard. I'm looking at it.
Hey, Joe, can you put up the Carbon County ILS for me for a second?
I don't think I can.
Go to SkyVector and look at it on the sectional. He's got to cross a lot of terrain to get up there. Cedar City has no terrain at all, and it's behind him.
Yeah,
And
that's
he's probably on the localizer already.
And the,
yeah. No,
the winds
knowing
are
the area of
favorable,
Cedar City is the only choice.
and the winds will be working with him.
The only reason for the DME is the arc here. If they can get straight in, you're right in front of it. They can vector you on at 11,000. They lose you at 11, which is below the MSA anyway, after 11.6 on the final. So you could easily do the localizer and glide slope, and you have that equipment on board. And you also have minimums that are, what's the minimums here? It's probably 200.5. And if they are, you're above minimums, very well above minimums here at Cedar City, at Carbon County.
Except that he's going to need DME for the miss.
Can you put that back up?
It's not just the arc, you need DME for the miss.
The terrain strongly favors Cedar City. I've been into both of those airports, and you don't want to go into Carbon County.
Plus in Cedar City, the air traffic controller can get you on your the radar screen a lot easier than they can at Carbon County.
Okay, let's see if I don't mirror this last little part then. All right, then, Mike, I'm glad you're aboard because we get a professional output. And Kelly, good input there. Let's see what I can do here.
Now let's hear from Doug Stewart, who will provide further insight and analysis on this scenario.
As a student pilot, I heard those familiar aviation aphorisms. There's nothing as useless as altitude above you, runway behind you, and fuel left on the ground. And it's better to be on the ground wishing you were up in the sky than up in the sky wishing you were down on the ground. Hopefully, this pilot has heard them too, because they have to make a difficult decision without much time to ponder the possibilities. Here they are in an airplane that has lost its GPS capabilities, above high terrain, with limited fuel, strong winds out of the northeast, potential icing, and no radar service. What else could go wrong? A bad decision, that's what. If I were this pilot, I would choose option 2 and head for Delta Municipal. It's the closest airport. The weather is above minimums, the approach and landing will be into a headwind, and I have all the equipment I'll need to fly the approach. It will require good situational awareness for descent planning, but it's a manageable risk. More importantly, it gets me on the ground faster than any other option. It should take roughly 15 minutes to reach the Delta VOR. 4 minutes into that trip, I could safely descend to the Oroka of 12,400 feet. Once I receive the Delta VOR, and I'm confident it's less than 25 miles away, I can descend to the MSA of 11,600 feet. Crossing the VOR, I'd turn in the hold and descend to 7,300 feet. I think that's worth the time rather than a kamikaze descent while outbound. The hold also lets me get established on the 187-degree radial. Once inbound, there are no real challenges. I'll easily make 6,200 feet by the VOR. Considering the headwind, I should have at least 3 minutes to descend to the minimums of 5,500. With visibility of 1.5 miles, I should see the runway past the VDP, but with ample room to land a 182. The total time from making the decision to landing shouldn't exceed 40 minutes. Let's compare it to some of the other choices. Just getting overhead at Carbon County in option 1 will take almost as long as landing at Delta Municipal. And I'd still have to fly Carbon County's approach. The weather at Carbon County is at minimums for visibility and only 200 feet above DA. And how would we get established on the approach? ATC could provide vectors if we stay above 11,000 feet, but we'd be well above the glide slope. Without DME or radar, we can't identify SARO and get down to the glide slope. Even if we could get established on that approach, what if we had to go missed? Without DME or radar, we can't identify FOSOG. For me, this option isn't viable. What about option 3 of Provo and the ILS runway 13? One could dead reckon northwesterly and intercept Victor 2-1 and then fly the airway to the Fairfield VOR. This should take 35 to 40 minutes. Add another 15 minutes for a vectored approach, and this could take 20 minutes more than going to Delta Municipal. But that's assuming we don't go missed on this tailwind approach. The runway is 8,600 feet long. The tailwind plus the high true airspeed due to the altitude means a high ground speed and a potentially exciting arrival. It's not necessarily a no-go, but I have better options. This leaves us with option 4, turning tail and heading to Cedar City. I could dead reckon to Victor 244. From there, I could fly the transition to Bellevue for the ILS runway 20. With a kick-butt tailwind, this could have me on the ground in 50 minutes or so. Really not much more than option 1. You know, Cedar City might be a better choice. It's a tailwind approach, but we'd have certain minimums, albeit somewhat low. We'd also have radar coverage and the equipment to fly a mist. So why didn't I choose this option? Because it took me about 3 hours to analyze all the choices. In this scenario, there isn't the luxury of time. We're flying along somewhat fat, dumb, and happy. There's a building pucker factor with the unanticipated headwinds and those GPS service annunciations. Then all GPS information goes out, and we must commit to a decision because there won't be fuel for much of a plan B. I've been in IMC when both onboard GPSs enunciated loss of GPS navigation, dead reckoning. My client was somewhat freaked out, but I had instructed to always have the VOR frequency loaded in the number 1 nav, as well as updating nav2 with the VORs on either side of our route as we traveled. nav2 drove the bearing pointer in the PFD. With this belt and suspenders mentality, when we lost the GPS, we merely hit the CDI button so the HSI used the VOR signal for guidance. We were already headed to that VOR using GPS, so we just continued along the airway. We had tracked our position on the airway using the bearing pointers as we went. Which gets us back to those aphorisms. Add to it that a nav radio doing nothing is like altitude above you, useless. Had our pilot been tuning VORs, the limited navigation in this spot would have been more obvious. The options for a loss of GPS would have been more clear, and the response would have taken less time. The practice would have meant the skills of flying without GPS would be less rusty. And all of that would make wishing you were on the ground a quicker and less stressful reality.
Wow.
Well, he
So
made
there is a good use for VOR if you have all your GPS in there.
he made a very scary comment referring to planning, saying that took 3 hours to draw these conclusions. That is something that needs to be done on the ground before you walk out to the airplane to depart. Because especially in a single engine airplane, you never know when you have to get on the ground in a hurry. You need to know where your available en route options are throughout your entire route of flight. And that's something that has to be figured out on the ground before you depart.
Anyone else? I just thought they were both very interesting tonight, and I think we all learned a little. Just plan ahead, as Letterman says, be thorough and expect the unexpected. We just about timed it perfectly at 8:30. So,
did according to the scenario, did the failure occur around D10 intersection? Is that where all this happened?
well, I guess the preamps to it, it wasn't a good install. They had issues, and obviously the trouble wasn't a GPS outage, but a problem with the installation. So it could have occurred anytime, anywhere, and it really wouldn't have made much of a difference. But it's important to know that certain approaches require certain equipment, and to have that as a backup in your mind that you could go some other place before you even leave is a smart thing to do.
I just think it was strange that if it happened around Dayton or however you say it, it's 60 miles up to Delta and only 46 miles back to Cedar City behind you. So I didn't get why he would want to go, any greater distance than he would have to.
Not with the limited fuel, it's great. One missed approach, you might not have enough fuel.
And I picked Cedar City because you got the tailwinds working for you in the circling approach.
Absolutely.
I learned that lesson the hard way going to Vegas, a little off airport landing, 3 miles to the 10th in sight of Jean. What a heartbreaker. Headwinds will get you every time if you're not paying attention.
Wow. No.
Could have turned back to Baker, and I had the tailwinds working for me. But that's lesson learned.
No, hey, you get to play another day. It's all right. No.
True
But
enough.
I mean, I'm building a new airplane now, an RV, and it's all going to be glass. And we hadn't planned to put a VOR in there, but boy, it makes you think. Well, where's your backup? What if something like that happened there? You wouldn't have those options.
That's why, Joe, I have 2 VORs besides my GPS.
To look at yours, I haven't made my final decision, but I just figured in 10 years it'll be more decommissioned than there are now, certainly.
Yeah, if they're going to keep a minimum system.
Yeah. Bare
And
bones.
it also gives you the IOS capability that you don't have if you don't have one.
No, you got VNAV and most of the new stuff though, but not without GPS. You're right.
Well, remember, Joe, one thing about that GPS equipment, it went into dead reckoning. That particular equipment has a dead reckoning capability, so navigation really wasn't lost yet. DME isn't really a player in the GPS world. You don't actually use DME, but because the GPS positions are all at your altitude, they're not slant range or anything else. So I have to look at the specs on that equipment, but I am sure that if it went into dead reckoning, it probably uses the proper formula, which is a 2 nautical mile per hour drift rate applied to the. So there was plenty of opportunity to navigate and find whatever you need. It didn't go away. It went into dead reckoning. Just so you know, we're looking at the instrument.
So I shouldn't put the ADF back in.
I don't know. I don't think I'd do that.
Only if you want to listen to country.
Joe, you should definitely put your ADF back in.
Yeah,
and you should download my overlay of all of the for flight of all of the AM radio stations in the United States. So you can focus in on those to navigate.
Yeah, I had all that in my old airplane.
Is that station still available that has the Native American language on it on 660?
You know, I don't know. I could take a look.
Yeah,
where was it located? Where was it located?
Here in Arizona, because it was the Navajo station.
Oh, I think I know which one you're talking about. Yeah.
Yes, it's 660. It's always before we took all the ADFs out of the airplanes, that used to be one we tune up, and you could hear the Indians speaking native. You know, they could speak. I'm sure it was Navajo or something like that, but it was 660 here.
Was the station up in the Northwest? Oh yeah, I see it. Yeah, it looks like it's still there. Yep.
Oh yeah, I haven't. Nobody has any equipment they can receive.
Mostly north of Window Rock. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's the place. Yep. Navajo Station, right?
Right. Yep. Yeah, it's one of the few 660s still around actually, and their power was increased because of the fact that it was one of the few stations like that where they often spoke a native language.
Yeah, I mean, I would say primarily native language. It was for the natives, but for the American Indians. But it was very interesting to listen to because occasionally they'd have somebody on there that, was speaking English and they would translate a little and you get a little flavor for it.
Right.
WFAN New York is 660. That's the sports radio station. That's still operating.
Go Nick.
All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for coming here tonight. Alex, are you still here?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Well, unless there's something you have to add, I was going to sort of end it for the IMC side.
Okay. Yeah, I do have a couple of quick things. So for Wings credit, I took attendance, but if I miss you, so make sure that you respond when I send the follow-up email so I can get it corrected. Also, somebody in the very beginning had a question about how the club works or something. So
yeah, that was me.
Ask that question. Yeah, go ahead and throw that in now. Just keep in mind that Joseph technically knows everything, but we're both just volunteers. But if it's anything too difficult, I'll have him answer.
Well, it's more of point of order. I'm the new kid on the block. I just joined your chapter about a month ago or 3 weeks ago, and Kelly gave me a nice warm introduction. Thank you, Kelly. He introduced me to his RV10. Beautiful bird, still in need of a paint job, but loved it. Very nice. Got me all excited. Anyway, what the question I had wasn't so much a club working question, was I am in need of a favor. And the favor is there anybody on this meeting who has, apart from you, Kelly, who has a hangar with an airplane, a finished airplane, inside a hangar at Chandler at CHD? And if they do, would they be interested in participating in a photo shoot? Details will be offline. I won't go into the details here, but if they are, I will post my email address in the chat window. Shoot me an email and we can have this discussion offline. Chime in if there is at least one yes out there. I'll do this. Otherwise, I won't worry about it. Is there anybody that's interested to get more information?
I think at least one person who was online has departed, who has a hangar with a Mooney in it.
Okay, has to be a hangar. Doesn't necessarily have to have an airplane in it, but it does have to be a hangar. And details will be offline. I'm not going to bring it up here.
Yeah, just shoot me an email. I can get you names of several.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much.
I have one other thing to ask. So a while back, we did a survey to see when, if we were going to keep doing Zoom meetings, what days of the week, whether you want the meetings back to back, separate weeks, all that. And overwhelmingly, people wanted it back to back the same night. So seeing how this worked tonight, was this taking up too much time? Do you still feel the same way? Anybody have any comments on that? Because again, we'll probably do it at least one more or 2 more months before we go back to in person.
Alex, I like the back-to-back format quite a bit better, just in terms of scheduling and so on. And also it's always good to kind of consider a little bit different things going on, both in because the VFR, the VMC club and the IMC club have different foci, and I enjoy that. The other thing is, I think, it's a conservative thing to do, certainly to hold off on the in-person meetings for a while, although I think everybody does tend to miss them. I would suggest that we try to arrange a combination format initially when going back to in-person. I think I've mentioned this to you before, that we might limit attendance to some extent, so we're not completely packed in there. I mean, clearly the pandemic is dying, but a lot of the people in this group, of course, do fall into the very susceptible age groups and are at high risk of serious repercussions from catching COVID-19. So if we do go back to in person, maybe we could also do a combination, because I noticed that when we first started tonight, weren't there 70 some people participating here? That's more than we can ever pack into that room.
Right. Yeah. The meeting room holds 44 legally, and yeah, we were up to 70. So
Yeah.
it was a lot more than otherwise would have attended.
Yeah. So could we limit to maybe 22 for a while, and then also offer the Zoom option? No.
The last I knew, the city had that room restricted to 11 people.
Yeah, 11
Oh,
people. Yeah.
wow.
There's a
Okay.
bigger room at Tumbleweed. I don't know what it takes to get permission to use it.
So we did talk about, actually even before the pandemic, of doing some type of streaming during an in-person meeting. No, we never got that far, and I don't know if it's within my technical capabilities, so I might need some help. Joe, with all his expertise on that, might be able to string something together. And I've been in his workshop. I'm sure he could build something.
Well, if we could, this covert thing is going to keep everybody down a little bit, but another option we might be able to negotiate is, we've met before at Falcon Field at the school that the Chinese students use. They got multiple classrooms, they can tie them all together there. I know the FAA's had some events there. If anyone knows the contact there, we might might give them a call and see what their conditions are during this period of time.
Well, I'm sorry. Can you say that again? Which place?
Well, there's somebody staring up. What was the name again?
CAE.
Okay, CAE. They're at
Oxford.
Field.
Oh, this is over at Falcon?
Yeah, it'd be Oxford.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I don't know anybody there, but I do know some people who probably know somebody there. We could.
There's somebody from the FAA that used to put on a scenario very similar to what we're doing here now. And they knew the people there, and you can put one or two classrooms together and easily get quite a few more than we can at Chandler. But once again, it depends on what the COVID-19 response is and how they feel about it.
Well, Joe, I'll ping my contact at the Red Rock Flight School, who tends to know all the people at the flight schools there on the field, and see if he knows somebody we could at least ask about it. So it would be for a, you know, I mean, it's for a EAA meeting essentially. So I would assume they'd be open to that.
Steve, do you recall the name of the representative from that school that was with the FAA, the checkout person that rented the rooms?
His
Well,
first name.
The
His
head
first
safety,
name was Brent, but I don't remember his last name.
Brent Crow.
Yeah, he actually he was promoted to director of safety for their entire system, not just for Oxford Falcon. So I don't know that he's still there doing that. I don't know where their headquarters are. So, but anyway.
But his scenarios were pretty much just like we're doing now, but all local here in Phoenix with actual people possibly in the audience that were involved.
Yeah.
Jeff, if you're still here, do you have your question? You want to go ahead and ask it now?
Just say no.
Uh-oh, we've got somebody with an open mic.
All right, that was Steve. He's gone now.
Okay. Yeah, Jeff
No,
Karski had
that
a
was
question.
me. Somebody walked into the room. Sorry.
All right.
I'll wait. Okay. In the video we were watching, they also lost the ADS-B. Does anybody have an opinion why the install problem that killed their GPS also stopped their ADS-B from working? Why would both go out?
That's an easy answer. The ADS-B depends on the GPS for location and velocity.
Okay.
It can have its own GPS built. It can have its own GPS built in. Some ADS-Bs slave the main GPS unit, which is what they were talking about in the presentation. Most ADS-Bs have their own.
Okay. Do you guys think that the outage was because of a poor antenna situation or the actual avionics wasn't installed correctly?
My guess, the antennas. You mentioned corrosion, et cetera, and so forth. Maybe they didn't put the good coax to it. Maybe the screws didn't make good contact for a ground plane.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you.
Sounds like an antenna problem, Joe. That's right up your alley.
Yeah. We talked about earlier how critical a VOR antenna is that everything shares it. You know, nav 1, nav 2, your divide slope, everything is common sometimes in one antenna. So
But it's definitely a system that should have been flight tested in VFR conditions before they ever did an IFR flight.
no, and you're right. And he knew there was issues.
Damn tootin'.
Yeah. So true.
Joe, what was the name of that scenario? The one in Utah? The title of it?
I'll get it to you in a second. I can probably look
It was
for
bad decisions over Richfield.
Yeah. The one with the GPS issue?
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah, that was I don't have a name for it. I just called it lost the GPS, but it was over.
It was over Richfield.
Yeah. Let me look at it.
So you plan to stop for a stretch break.
Does it say in the very beginning, like a title screen, what the title
I
is?
don't title for it. Or I've renamed the title.
Issues getting
Yeah.
smoothly.
No. I'll get it. I have it elsewhere.
You might be able to see it in the properties if you right click on the icon on your desktop and select properties. Then there's a supplemental screen that might have a title attached to it.
All right. How about
Look under I think it's details, the details panel under properties. It might, if the people that made the video did their homework.
I did not. I can tell you what the speed of it is, but the audio quality. But I have that.
But they left out all the real details. Nice.
All the details. I renamed it so I know what it was about, GPS rather than just intro and stuff. So I'll get that for you.
Right.
Did anybody have any problem with the Zoom and registration method that I set up this time for the meeting, where you did the FAA safety and then you clicked for the Zoom and then got a acknowledgement and your link and everything on that? Was that easier, worse?
Easy way to do it.
It worked fine.
Yeah, okay.
My first time, so I had nothing to compare it to.
Mm.
No issues though.
Well, before that, we'd kind of like Joe would. Never mind. I'm just being silly.
You did good. Good, Alex. You did good.
His background shows him busy aviating.
Okay.
Cross-checking and verifying with conventional nav aids.
So if we're not already aware, our regular schedule is the first Tuesday every month, 6:30 is tonight, but normally it's been like 7:30,